Well, I mean, like I say, trauma is by far the most common factor in all the people that I see. Now, when people think of trauma, they think of specific things. They think of, like you said, abuse, or they think of accidents, or they think of this, or they think of that. And while there's no sort of definition of what a traumatic event is, it's about the emotional response to the event, and people respond differently. Some people respond, with a more kind of, with a more intense emotional thing. And that's, we could all have the same experience in this room, all 200 of us, and our emotional responses could all be different. So it's about that response. But in terms of how it affects people and what I see, it's what you said a minute ago, Mike, about people, and I think Sarah said something about the absence of symptoms, the absence of things. So people who've been through trauma aren't always 24 hours a day shaking and appearing to be traumatized. Okay, that doesn't mean they're not traumatized, though. It's just a trigger. When they're triggered, either internally, externally, I know, by something that happens or thoughts, then the kind of things that you might expect to see, suicidal thoughts, psychosis, dissociation, substance misuse, all that kicks in. But the problem is, when people see them not in that state, they assume, I hate to use the word okay, but that's what they assume, they're okay. So also, when someone's like that, when they're not experiencing being triggered, in my opinion, right, when they're like that, they may try to engage in housing services, but while they're not triggered, they might just assume they're okay because they have an absence, they're not experiencing voices, etc. When they are triggered, experiencing all these things, they're far less likely then to try and engage with housing services, because they might just, avoid situations or isolate. So then again, it doesn't come into play when they're dealing with the housing situation. But in terms of mental health, it is by far the biggest factor, in its present, past, and continuing. I saw in the last 2 years, I saw 258 people. 220 of those had traumatic experiences they reported to me. Many of them had multiple, prior to becoming homeless, during homeless, and even beyond homelessness, multiple traumas. And what happens is, sorry if I'm waffling on a bit too much, what happens is they try and reach out to services. Services will often say, but I think Paul was right when he was saying about, I can't remember the phrase you used, institutional rejection. I like that phrase. It's a very good phrase. So what happens is they go to services, and because of where they're from, they're homeless, whatever, they're often labelled as depressed, anxiety, and also as addicts. These things aren't seen as a whole, they're just seen as separate. And there's a bit of a bias there in terms of that. And then what happens then, the treatments offered don't address the underlying trauma. Therefore, treatments offered aren't always effective, because their mental health is based on trauma. That's not all services. I'm not just painting everybody like that. That is just a more sort of traditional way that people are treated. So yeah, it's a massive issue in their lives.